There's the
There we
countdown.
go. That's it.
Hello and welcome to the Self Recording Band podcast. I'm your host, Benedikt Hain, and I am not here today with my co host as usual, but instead I'm joined by James from Offset Vision. Offset Vision is a band from Australia that I've worked with as a mixing engineer and that I've sort of helped a little bit at least during the production process as well, like helped them I listened to demos, gave feedback, and sort of guided them through the process a little bit. But they did the tracking, the production, everything themselves, basically, with a little guidance, as I said. But they did everything themselves, and I'm pretty excited to talk about that today with you, James. And I have a couple of questions because I think that the transformation from like demo to finished thing has been incredible in your case. I've listened to the early demos and I've listened to the final thing, of course, and I'm really stoked about the how the record came out, and I'm just curious to hear all about that process and what exactly you did there
Yeah,
because
for
that
sure.
is a pretty cool story. So welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Thank you for taking the time. Hello,
No
James.
worries.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about your band first of all, maybe.
Um, the band is primarily myself and Mackie or Mark. Um, we do all of the writing, best buddies since high school. So we pretty much do everything in just between the two of us, all the recording, all the writing, all that sort of thing. And then we've got Callum and Dylan as well, our bass player and guitar player respectively. They both Callum does artwork and stuff as well, which is good. Keeps the budget down a bit, and Dylan does a lot of the networking stuff, finding us gigs and sort of things. So it's really a team effort at this point, which is good.
Awesome, cool to hear. So it's pretty, so like everything is pretty DIY then. You do a lot of the
Yeah,
stuff yourselves.
yeah,
The video stuff as well too, because for the first single of that record that we did together, you have put out a pretty awesome video. And
yeah,
is that,
yeah.
did you do that yourself as well?
We have a friend of ours named Marty Sinclair at his company's called Digital. He lives here in our city as well, and he helped us out with that, which was really cool. It's pretty much just it was just us and him. There was no one else really, even in the building at the time. We did it at like 3 a.m. or something.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that video came out really great. And so I was just wondering about that. Now, to the record, maybe before we talk about how it came together and what you did, tell us a little bit about that, about the whole like what did you make here? What are you planning to do with it? What's the record about? What's the idea behind it?
Um, really, the Mark and I just we love writing music. We love playing music. We just wanted to make songs that were fun to play and fun to perform. There wasn't really any. There's no really like agenda to it. It's not really about anything. Just a lot of the lyrics don't even really make sense, and not that you can understand half of them anyway, as I've been told. But um, yeah, it's sorry, what was the question again?
Now, like what the idea behind the record was, and what I just want to give people a little context and talk about and introduce the record first, and talk about the record first before we talk about how you actually made it, because
Yeah, okay.
I think so. The main reason I'm asking is it's always interesting to me to find out why people make and record and release music in the first place, because there are different reasons for that. Some people do it just for self-actualization reasons. Other people have like real. Oh, I mean, all these goals are real. Self-actualization is very real, but some people have like more tangible goals, like more. I don't know. There's different motivations behind making a record, and in your case, like it's only quote unquote an EP or a small album, whatever you want to call it, like something in between. It's a couple of songs, but the amount of effort and time that went into it, and the amount of effort that is necessary to put something like that together and release it is like pretty substantial. And so you need
Sure.
motivation and drive to pull that off. And that is different for different bands and different people. And I'm just always curious about hearing that, and knowing why I wanted to make it in the first place, what the idea behind was, and What makes you excited about writing and putting up music together with your friends as a band?
Yeah. It literally is nothing more than us than Mark and I pretty much just hanging out. We both love writing music. We just want to write the best songs possible. We really had no idea when we started a couple of years ago. We had no idea what it how much effort it was going to be, but it's definitely a lot more rewarding than we thought as well. It's been quite a journey, sort of us growing sort of together and growing up and growing more knowledgeable on the sort of thing. It's been really fun.
Cool. That's awesome to hear. You're still pretty young, I think. That can I ask you how old you are?
I'm 23.
Okay, yeah. So that is like, you're pretty young, and if when you say like you didn't know back when you started, like how old were you when you started that band and
Uh,
when you first made plans to make a record?
yeah. Well, Mark and I have been writing songs together pretty much since like we left high school, and then we are sort of like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, we just started writing songs, and we played in another like punk band, which was just sort of an underground thing. We all our songs were joke songs, like sort of Blink 182 type style, and it wasn't until um, about 2 years ago that we actually started to sort of get serious about it. Sort of like, hey, like we could actually like do something with this. We could actually like make an effort rather than just sort of cruise through. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's been a while. It's been a while, and it's you're still just beginning, sort of. So
yeah, it's
yeah,
only
because
been
that's why I'm asking, because a lot of people when they see a young band or a debut record from a band, they think like they just started, like as if they had started like 2 months ago and now this record is out and now the band starts. But oftentimes before that, there are already years of these people playing
yeah,
together, practicing together, and before it finally turns into this sort of serious thing or this actual band that exists and puts out stuff. So there's this behind the scenes part that people often don't see that happens years before the first record
yeah.
comes out often.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I swear I'm over you. The first single we released actually was written over a year ago. It was written by the time it was released. I think it was written something like one day less than it, and a year to the date from when it was released. So, and for ages, nobody heard it, and there was only nothing really changed about it. We did a couple of things that you suggested when we sent you the demo. We changed a couple of things and little tweaks, but the song as a whole was written a year ago, and it's just been sitting there doing nothing for a long time.
Wow. Yeah. So cool. So the genre union is like, I would say you could say it's pop punk, like
Yeah,
modern
for sure.
pop punk sort of style. Why how like why is that what you wanted to do? Because I mean, it's still there's still a scene for that, and it's kind of pretty popular. But also, your particular sound sort of reminds me of bands from, I don't know, like 10, 15, sometimes 20, maybe 20 years ago. There has been a wave of bands doing similar things, and that as I said, there's still pop punk today, but I don't know. You remind me of some of the classic bands of that genre, which is interesting because, as I said, you're pretty young, and you kind of blend the two together very well. There are modern influences, but it's still a pretty, I don't know how to say, it's a pretty classic punk rock or early pop punk vibe
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
get from
for
that. So,
sure.
so where does it come from?
There's actually with between Mark and I, and then even externally with Callum and Dylan, with our sort of the bands that we draw influence from is like wide. Like there's a lot of different random influences that wouldn't really make sense compared to what we sound like. Like Dylan in particular and Callum are into really like heavy stuff as well. Mark and I grew up on bands like Neck Deep and Stro So Far, and even like Blink 182, Green Day, Sum 41. They were sort of not as relevant as when we were kids, but they were so big that they're still around now. So
Yeah, yeah. True, true. Yeah, you can hear the heavier influences for sure, I think. There is a hardcore element to it, I think, in what you do. There's some heavier breakdown sort of parts. And also, um, I think the singing style is it is melodic, but it's also energetic and somewhat aggressive, maybe a little more aggressive than some of the bands you mentioned now. Very melodic and very clean, clear
Yeah.
sounding, whereas you have this rough edge to it a little bit and a little bit of that heavier influence. So does that come from you, or is that because Dylan or other people in the band are
Um,
into heavier stuff?
no, it started out when we were first writing songs. I was just doing cleans, and we just we just felt that it wasn't really standing out, and there was just a lot, like hundreds and hundreds of bands doing the same thing, and we just really wanted to sort of make things seem sort of more energetic and really like get right in people's faces and catch people's ears a bit more. So I started basically just started just going as hard as I could. Took lessons on making sure I didn't wreck my voice and stuff, and that was a conscious decision. Trying to make try to just trying to make our band sound as best as possibly can, and I think it probably ended up suiting my voice a bit better than trying to do the cleans anyway.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's the perfect fit, to be honest. And I hope people are making notes, and I hope one of these notes
Yeah,
is he took lessons because
yeah,
that's something
definitely
not many people
lessons.
do.
Get
Yeah,
lessons if anyone's watching this and they're not sure. Get lessons. It helps so much. Even if it's not, even if you don't think you need them, you say, "Oh, I sing pretty great." Just in terms of learning how to look after yourself. Um, for me, it was I was a terrible singer when I first started lessons, and I'm still not great now. But the lessons helped me a lot, and primarily just looking after my voice. Like after shows, even when we first started playing shows with Offset Vision, um, going that aggressive, like going like that aggressive and hard for half an hour straight, my voice would be wrecked at the end of the night, and for basically 2 days, I'd be struggling to get it back to normal, and that's not really sustainable
Mm.
over the course of if we want to be in this band for years. So it's the lessons really helped with that. Just making sure I look after myself so I can keep doing it night in, night out.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. That is something so many people don't realize until it's too late, because you can actually harm yourself permanently
Yeah.
if you tour for years and you don't do that, and you can really damage your voice. And yeah, absolutely. Cool. Cool to hear. I didn't even know that. But what I did notice, though, is what I said in the beginning, is the big transformation that you went through and that the whole record went through. And I found that fascinating because, to give people a little, um, like, the story behind it, from my perspective, like, you contacted me about a year ago, almost like last fall or
It
so.
was a while ago.
Yeah. So you were talking about you were about to make this record and you want to do it yourself, and you were looking for a mixer. And we started like figuring out all the details, had a call together, and then started working together. And you started by sending me demos. I had a listen and gave back my initial thoughts and gut feeling about the songs, basically. And I immediately thought the songs were cool, but I also noticed a couple of things, like tuning issues with the guitars, which is pretty common. Like, it's one
Uh,
of the most, yeah, common issues
a
that
lot
people
of
have.
a lot of the guitar tuning issues was due to us just being really lazy recording demos, just like coming up with
Yeah,
a cool idea, quick record it before we forget, sort of thing. But
yeah.
um,
I mean, and that's good because you didn't waste time going too much into the details. You just wanted to capture the idea when it's fresh, and so that's absolutely understandable. And then there were minor, like, arrangement changes and stuff that I
mm,
suggested, and basically, as you said, the songs were written, and it's pretty much what ended up being on the record. But still, from what the demo sounded like to what you sent me when you were finished tracking, that was pretty impressive. And I'd love to hear about that, because part of because you said that you were just doing quick demos and didn't really care
yeah,
about the details at this point.
mm.
But I assume that there's also been a learning curve, and there's also been stuff
Oh,
that
for
you figured
sure.
out in the process, like through trial and error and whatever. And like, I just want to know about how you went about recording, what you discovered, what roadblocks you hit, maybe how did you overcome them? Because again, the raw tracks and the demos and the raw tracks you sent me for the mix were two different things, like completely. Like, I was so excited and a little bit relieved, to be honest, when I heard the raw stuff, because like my assistant prepped the session and I got into our B room and like he hit play and I listened to the raw tracks for the first time and I was like, dude, that's incredible. I can't wait to mix this. This is like so much better than those demos. And I knew
Hmm.
sort of it's gonna be like that because I liked the songs and I knew that you were serious about what you're doing. But when I first heard that, I remember how I got like really excited because it just knew that this is gonna work. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me about that process a little bit,
Um,
please.
as we to start off, we had no idea really what we needed to do. We talked to a buddy Kelly of ours who does sort of recording and mixing just for local bands around here a bit. Not so much anymore, but went to school for it and stuff. And because we were just recording like a rhythm guitar left, a rhythm guitar right, just hard panning them. Same with lead guitar, and he sort of suggested that like we record more guitars. Like so, we ended up quad tracking rhythms and lead. I don't think we really needed to quad track leads, but rhythms definitely. I think that helped. Um, and one thing that you mentioned too is adding more vocal harmonies because for a while I was literally just lead double and that was it. But I think just in terms of making the vocals sound really big, following your suggestion, having like for a lot of the songs, especially in the choruses, was like a lead, two doubles left and right, a low, and one or two harmonies as well. And it just really, even when you can't hear them in the finished product, like just makes them sound so much bigger. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, just in terms of another thing that we had no idea about until you mentioned it was tuning to sustain or tuning to attack. We were just tuning to sustain every time. Never thought anything about it, but
Yeah.
like because we play so, especially me, I hit the strings so hard that
Which is good.
like everything's just super sharp all the time,
Yeah.
and we took it and got our both of our guitars set up properly at a place in town here and just said, hey, we hit the strings really hard. We want it tuned to drop C sharp and he sent it back and they sounded so much better. So that was probably uh, helped us out a lot, just having the guitars set up nice. And then just taking the time to make sure we got everything as close as possible. With the vocals, I did a lot of takes. Just and I sometimes I feel like the final takes probably weren't even the best ones I did. I just kept like, I can do it better, I can do it better, and eventually I just became okay with what I had already. And yeah, it's definitely a big learning curve for us recording this and like setting up the room and stuff for recording. We hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that. Obviously, with guitars and stuff, it's we did all DI guitars and bass. But that wasn't as big of an issue with the room. But with the vocals especially, I bought a bunch of foam things and sat them all around the room here and tested a few things with curtains, putting doonas over things. Same with the drums. We went to our friend Kelly's house again, and Mark recorded drums there, and we had doonas up over windows and rugs laying down and all sorts of stuff. And it looked really weird walking into a room. It's just a drum kit and just doonas on the wall and random bits of foam everywhere. Like wouldn't have really made sense. It did not look professional at all, but I think it came out okay, and we definitely know what things we're going to do better next time. Even now,
Yeah, for sure.
as happy as we were with it, we know we're going to do things better next time. But I was really proud of how much we learnt throughout this whole thing.
That's cool. Yeah. I think the approach was exactly right because with with the drums, for example, I mean, nobody cares what the room looked like. It's
Yeah.
the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers in the end. And obviously, you have to do what you have to do to control the room. And if that means putting up like blankets and whatever you have everywhere, then that's what it takes. And I think the approach was really was absolutely right because I remember you mentioning when we talked about the record and about the how you're going to record things. I remember you saying that you want to capture the drums as dry and as like clean as possible, and so that I have the flexibility to use the overheads and cymbals and stereo image, but then put samples on top of it and
Hmm.
make it like modern and punchy and everything. And the key to doing that successfully is to have a controlled room because if if you don't have that, you have the sort of weird ambience, especially with small rooms that don't sound
Mm,
particularly great. You have that sort of weird, yeah, practice room vibe, or this sort of
mm,
small room sound. You have that in every single mic, and also the overheads. And the way you did it, you sent me a pretty controlled picture of the kit that was very accurate. That was where the symbols were clearly separate, and I could hear everything. I could hear the crashes, the hat. There was no like phase issues from weird reflections from the rooms, and I could easily put samples on top of it without it sounding really fake or triggered. I think
mm.
that the final, at least I think so,
Yeah.
that the final product really sounds like an organic drum kit because it
Mm,
blends really well with what you sent me, and that is only possible in a controlled environment like that, or in a really really awesome drum room, which nobody has at home. So what
yeah.
you decided to do, yeah, what you decided to do there was the exact right thing. Some people think they should get all of the ambience from their living room or wherever they record. And sometimes this can be cool and can have a vibe, but it's very risky because if it doesn't
Mm,
work, you're sort of stuck. And in your case, I just had a blank, clean thing to work with, and I could turn it to whatever fit the song, and the result is a yeah, very natural, energetic sounding, organic sounding drum kit. And I was able to keep the original performance in there and not completely replace it with something fake. But it's the actual kit you're hearing on this record. It's just augmented with samples that blend
yeah.
really well, and I really like that because that made the whole record sound like a modern pop punk record, but at the same time still real and organic. And if I close my eyes and listen to it, I see the band in front of me, sort of, and that is awesome. So good
Yeah.
job there,
Yeah, actually
definitely.
one of the things we noticed straight away when we got the first mixes back was like, wow, the drums sound so good. And we had a specific plan with the drums, with miking it up. With the plan was to get sort of the body of the kit, we're miking things up sort of underneath and have the samples be sort of the attack, was sort of the
Yeah,
plan for that. And we're really happy with that, how that came about. Because the plan was to basically give you everything just dry and as sort of flat as possible, so then you can sort of do what you do best and really get the best out of everything.
yeah, that worked. Great job there.
Mm,
And
yeah.
drums is a challenge. I mean, I don't know if you
Mm,
remember much about the drum session or how much you personally were involved in that, but
not
I can
much.
only imagine that the drums. I mean, drums recording drums at home is always a challenge. And I don't know if you specifically hit any like sort of roadblocks or problems or issues with that, uh, but I can only imagine that this has been a challenge, and it took probably a while to get it right. Am I right? Or was it
Um,
something that was very easy to do for you?
in You're talking about just the drums in
The
particular?
the drums, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually wasn't there for most. I only got
Okay,
there at the end because I was at work. So I sort of saw Mark record the last song pretty much. It was him basically sitting in a room with the drums and our friend Kelly hitting record. Um, I know they did have a lot of trouble with. I just actually, I don't think they really had much trouble with anything at all because Kelly
cool.
definitely knows what he's doing. He helped us out a lot.
That's good.
And just once, I think they went a bit overkill with the room in the end. They just wanted to make the room as quiet as possible. And I think they did a really good job of that. Uh, I'd have to talk to Mark about if they had any real issues, but they didn't really mention anything. Um,
Okay, cool.
I think what he did was he literally got the tracks in his phone, and just got his little in-ear monitors, just press play with a click track and just played along with the track, and then
Yeah,
it was recorded through a bunch of mics, and we borrowed microphones and leads from a local studio here. They were kind enough to give us a good
cool.
price to rent them for a day, which was nice.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So there are still a couple of things to unpack here that I want people to remember and notice, because what stands out to me when I listen to all of that is you did a very good job at figuring out what you can really do yourself, and then getting help with everything you can't do well, and like
Mm,
realizing that, and like just being smart about it. Like nobody can do everything on the highest level, at the highest level. That's just not
yeah.
possible. So everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and you did a pretty good job at figuring this out. And then there was obviously no ego that got in the way, and you just got help with certain things. So there's the vocal lessons. There is you got a friend to help you with drum recording who knew what he was doing. You borrowed mics from a studio instead of just buying the cheapest stuff
Yeah.
available or like doing some sort of compromise. You obviously hired a mixer to do the mix. So there is separate parts of the process that you hired out or got help with or just um, invested in, which paid off in the end, I think, because without all that, the record wouldn't be what it is. I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be the case. And so many
Mm.
people get in their own way because they think they have to do everything themselves. And I mean,
Yeah.
if it's just for you and just a hobby, and if you don't want to release the record or anything, I mean, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to release a record that you're really proud of and that sort of sounds competitive and that is just a professional sounding end product, then what you did is the smarter way of going about it. And I really want people to notice that because it's not super crazy expensive. I mean, it costs money, but it's not super crazy expensive, but it saves you such a big amount of time and headache and frustration if you do it that way. And you just focused on what you could do very well, which is your performances, vocal tracking yourself, tracking the guitars yourself, but then getting help with the complicated things, like technically complicated things like drums or mixing, or all the way to taking vocal lessons and stuff. So pretty cool. And especially young bands don't do that often, so that's
Mm.
pretty impressive to me. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, tell me a little bit about the guitars. We didn't talk about that. How did you record that? Where did you record it? And what was the process there? Anything special
Um, in
about
terms
that?
of just recording the final tracks you're talking about,
Yeah. Yeah.
literally, I would sit in this chair, I would grab my guitar, and I would record two takes of the rhythm and two takes of the lead, and then I would grab Mark's guitar and record two takes of the rhythm, two takes of the lead. Sometimes it took me an hour to record one part. Sometimes I did it all first go. One thing we did notice was uh, we weren't recording with headphones because we're like, oh, it's DI, it doesn't matter, and we're just having the
Yeah.
sound coming out. And we noticed in the final tracks, like, oh, you can hear the other tracks through the pickups of the guitar. And we went back and we re-recorded like a whole song and a half nearly of guitars because we're like, oh, we just realized that. And I think in the end there might have even still been some in there. And there's mistakes in the record. There's no, my singing. There was a few notes that were whoops, and luckily we got that cleaned up. And the guitars, there's a few bum notes and stuff. But we went through and redid a lot of it because just we didn't realize that stuff was going to come through the pickups in a DI. We didn't realize how much was gonna come through. That was a big surprise for us.
Yeah. Which kind of pickups do you have in your guitars? Because that is different from guitar to guitar or from pickup to pickup. Some single coils are very sensitive to stuff like that. Others not so much. Humbuckers tend to not have that problem as much. But
Mm.
which kind of pickups did you use?
Yeah. So that guitar there, the Telecaster, is it's actually a Squire. But it sounds better
Yeah.
than any Fender that I picked up. So where we used it.
Yep.
That's got the two I think 1972 style humbuckers in it. There's just to me that I haven't picked up a better sounding guitar. For what we're trying to do at least.
Totally.
Um, that wasn't so bad. We did notice a little bit, but mainly with Mark's Jazzmaster. He's got a Fender
Okay.
Jazzmaster that sounds really nice. We when we took it to get it set up, we shielded it a fair bit just to keep the buzz down. But that especially, we noticed a lot of noise like coming through the pickups, hearing the other tracks and stuff. So that was a bit of a challenge. We had to make sure we had the headphones on and we're doing that and sitting
Yeah.
silently in the room while the other person records.
Yeah. Did you did you plug straight into the interface, or did you use any sort of DI box or anything else
No,
in between the guitar and the interface?
no, I have a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 here, which I'm plugged into right now. It's permanently plugged into my computer. My speakers are plugged into the back of it. It's plugged straight into my computer. Literally just plugged guitars directly into the front of that. Obviously, when we recorded drums, we used a much bigger interface that friend Kelly had. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is literally just got two inputs. We only ever used one at a time. Just plugged it in, recorded the guitar. When I recorded vocals, because I went and bought an SM7B. We recorded with something else. I can't remember what it was. And I recorded a couple of songs with it, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't have that sort of punchiness that I wanted. So I went online and express shipped one of these in, um,
Mhm.
and it just made everything so much better. So I had to re-record a couple of songs with that, and a lot of people said that you'd need they had like called a cloud lifter just to lift
Yeah.
the gain on these, but I didn't didn't get one, didn't need it, because a lot of the time I was this close to the mic and screaming at it, so didn't need
Yeah.
any of that. But in terms of the guitars and stuff, it was direct DI. There's nothing, just lead from the guitar directly into the interface.
Cool. And what sort of plugin did you use to monitor the guitars? I assume you had some sort of amp sim on it just to hear what it sounds like through an amp.
Yeah, we have Bias Effects 2, which I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I'm allowed to say this, but it is a stolen copy that a friend emailed a Dropbox to us. Like, because before I have a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, which sounds amazing, but and we take it to gigs and we play through that all the time because it sounds incredible. But in terms of recording and mic placement, we know we're not great at it, and we can never replicate the same sound twice. So we just decided to, as good as it sounds, skip that altogether and go straight in, because that was just too risky.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, you could split it and record the amp
Mm.
and the DI at the same time, so you have that
We
safety
thought
net.
about doing that. I actually bought a just like an AB box from a local music store, but we didn't end up using, because we know just the mic placement was gonna, because we'd have to pack up every day, and the mic placement would be
Yeah.
different, and the room wasn't always going to be the same. But with DIs, we know that that's just one less variable we have to worry about. We don't have to worry about tuning knobs and stuff. We just give it to you
Yeah.
dry and let you do the magic.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, it worked because we've been talking about the vision for the record and like I knew what it's supposed to sound like. Sometimes this can be tricky because when bands only send DIs and no amp tracks, then I sort of have to guess what it's supposed to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah.
But in that case, I knew pretty well, I think, yeah, what it's supposed to sound like. So yeah, I mean, I'm always surprised by I don't know what it is. Some people who record directly into an interface like yours, and the Scarlett is a very popular one. Sometimes,
Cheap.
yeah, it's a cheap one and it's a popular one and it works and it's actually pretty great, especially for the money. But sometimes the DI sound a little dull and flat, and other
Mm,
times it works very well. So I assume it's something about how the impedance works with the guitars, like what guitar you use. With some guitars, I find that this particular interface and some others doesn't work as well. In your case, it worked very well. That's why I was
yep.
asking about your chain there because
Mm,
the reamping was pretty easy for me, and I was pretty quick at getting decent tones. And so I'm always surprised how well it works for some people, and in other cases not so much, but in
yep.
this case yeah, it was cool. And I'm wondering about one thing you mentioned before, and that was that you've played all the guitars basically. Was this a conscious decision where you said like it's more consistent if I do it all, if I do like both guitars and the leads on top, or why did you end up doing that?
Um, well, I didn't actually record all the guitars. What we did basically is I recorded guitars for, like, I'd record all the rhythm guitars for one song and
Oh,
all the
okay.
lead guitars for that song as well. But it's different. I'll do Blame, for example. Mark wrote Blame pretty much all
Hmm.
by himself, and I just sort of came in at the end and wrote a bunch of sort of lead guitar parts just to spice it up, and the lyrics and stuff and whatnot. That one he recorded all the rhythm guitars, and I recorded all the leads. We made sure that there was never like the same with like the doubles. We didn't do like I'd record the rhythm guitar and then he'd record the rhythm guitar. We just thought it'd be better if it'd just be more consistent. We didn't think it'd matter who did what. Um, Same with the leads. There was a couple of bits that we did and Mark did, and he wasn't there, and it was at my house, so I just re-recorded them. But when I did that, I had to make sure I did all of them. I couldn't just do one bit. I'd have to redo every single track to make it as consistent as possible. And we made sure that um, another thing is we didn't like record one part and then come back a couple of days later and record it. We made sure if we were recording the rhythm guitars for this track, we do it all that day.
Cool.
And yeah, sometimes it took a while to do one part, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, but again, such a smart way of going about it. Like you did everything right here because I think consistency is really key, especially with rhythm guitars. And there's a reason for yes, I mean, so many bands, so many big bands do it that way that they will have two guitarists on stage and they do rhythms together, but in the studio on their records, one person usually does the
Mm,
rhythms. Like the classic example is Metallica. Like Hetfield does the rhythms, period. And like it's just because some people have a very consistent right hand, and if you do a rhythm and then a double to that rhythm, if you do that yourself, it just will be tighter and it will be consistent, and there will be less tuning issues because everybody frets differently, everybody bends the strings a little differently and hits the strings differently. So that's a very wise thing to do. And again, obviously, there is no ego problems in your case
mm,
because some
yeah.
bands have that issue where everybody absolutely wants to play their parts on the record, even if the other person could do it better. And in your case, you just did what was best for the record and best
Mm.
for the workflow.
Yeah,
So
yeah. With us,
cool.
it was we just want to make the song sound as good as possible. Like Dylan, our guitarist, came in and at the end of Frustrated, there's a guitar solo. I do it in quotations because it's the easiest lead part in the whole song, the guitar solo at the end. He recorded that, and then after he'd recorded that and left, and I think he went overseas and he couldn't come back and re-record it. But I really wanted to change one particular thing, so I re-recorded it all myself, and I had to do all. We did 4 takes of the solo. I don't know. Did you use all 4? I don't think so.
I can remember. I don't think I used four. You mean
No.
have there been four different takes for that one solo?
Yeah,
And
we
I don't
did
know.
4 takes of everything. Like so, there was 4 rhythm
Yeah, yeah.
takes, 4 lead takes for everything, even the solo, except
Uh,
for like the
Okay.
auxiliary guitars.
Okay.
But
No, for the solo, I definitely didn't use the quad track thing. I,
yeah,
I I did use it for rhythms, not equal
mm,
volume, but I
yeah,
automated them depending on the parts. But for leads, definitely not, and for the solo, absolutely not. So it might just
yeah.
be one or maybe two, but
Mm.
like definitely not four.
Yeah, we weren't sure how what you wanted to do with it. We know with
Yeah.
rhythms you'd probably use 4 and you'd probably do hard pan
Yeah.
left and right with the Telecaster, and the Jazzmaster might be slightly more in and quieter. And with the
Yeah.
leads though, we didn't know if you were going to use 1 or 2 or left and right and middle, but so we just did 4. It's just
Yeah.
easier than
Which is the
yeah.
best
We
decision.
even did
Yeah.
2 bass takes, but like I don't know anyone that's ever used two bass takes in one track, but we did it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the tricky part about doing that is that s- sometimes people think when you send two options, like the person mixing it can just choose the better one, but that would require us to like compare every single part of every single take
Yeah.
and then figure out what's the best part, what the best parts are. And if I do that, like by the time I get through all the takes and I decide I've made the decision what to use, like all the objectivity is gone. Like I don't want to listen to every single detail of every single track 1,000 times before I start mixing.
Mm.
So that's the tricky part. So
Yeah.
I most often I tell people just make a decision, be the
Mm.
producer, decide what the one take is, and then let me do my thing with that. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, for sure. I mean, with the quad track guitars, it's a different thing, and I think you are very right when you're not sure. When in doubt, just record a couple more because you can always mute
Mm.
them,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and sometimes these double tracked or even quad track leads can be cool because for a guitar solo, not so much probably, but if you have like
Mm.
this wide part with like or like something more with a little bit of atmosphere and width to it and stuff, you can really create these soundscapes sort of or these vibey wide guitar layers things. And for that, double tracked leads can be really cool. But for the most part, or you can just make sure that the lead doesn't step on the vocal, so you can pan them apart a little bit and make space for the
Yeah,
vocal in the center.
that was the reason why we recorded more, because a lot of the times when we've tried to mix stuff terribly ourselves is just the leads and the vocals, just it was we didn't really know how to get it to work. But even listening to what you sent us back, we learned so much about mixing, about like you can't just have everything just as loud as possible. Like you've got to sacrifice stuff in the EQ range to for the better of the song. And yeah,
Yeah,
it was really interesting.
cool, cool. Good to hear that. Yeah, it's totally true. Something's got to give, and you can do things like sometimes it's a little. What helps is like you bring in. Let's say there is a part where it starts with only guitars, like rhythms and leads, and then the vocal comes in a little bit later, or in the second bar or whatever. What you can do is like you can have the leads in the first bar a little bit louder, you can introduce
Mm,
them at a higher level so that the listener hears and notices them. And then when the vocal comes in, you just sort of gradually bring
mm,
down the leads a little bit, and the listener doesn't necessarily notice that because
mm.
once you hear something, once the guitarists say, "Hey, we're here," then you notice them, and then you can sort of hide them, and but they're still there because you've already
Yeah,
heard them, and
because
it's like the
listening to it,
psychoacoustic
you'll
thing.
search for it more.
Exactly, this psychoacoustic thing of like, yeah, you only have to introduce them loud enough, and then you can
Mm,
bring them down, and they will still be there, sort of. Yeah, but that's just part of mixing.
mm,
Cool. So the simplest guitar chain possible, basically, just the guitar
yeah.
straight into
Hmm.
the interface. What about string choices? Did you put thought into that, and what did you do there? And also in terms of like changing strings, making sure you record with fresh strings, stuff like that.
Um, we've used the same size strings and the same brand of strings basically for the last year and a half. We found something that works for us. Found the right gauge that wasn't didn't get too floppy and or wasn't too big. We're using 52 to tens Ernie balls
Yeah,
on the Telecaster and the Jazzmaster, both with the exact same set up the exact same way. The bass was I don't remember the exact number. It was Ernie balls as well. Basically the
yeah,
same thing. They call it heavy top, skinny bottom or something, or
yeah.
the other way around. But
Because of
yeah,
the drop
basically
tuning,
kept
right?
that consistent.
Yeah. Cool. Because of the
Just
drop
used
tuning, right? It's like a hybrid thing where the lower strings, because of the drop
yeah,
tuning, have to be a little thicker.
yeah, exactly that. Because we did notice when we first started tuning down, it was probably 2018 when we decided that we thought it was cooler to tune to drop C sharp. And we're still using like 46s and just different brands. And when we broke a string, we just put one new one on, um, and we noticed that stuff would go out of tune really quickly at that low tuning, and it'd be really floppy. But since we changed up to those, we noticed that it sounded really good, and especially with the new strings, they sound really good. So we just stayed with that. And in terms of tracking, we'd basically record rhythm guitar, all the rhythm guitars for one song, um, and we'd change the strings basically after every day session. So we went through like four
Awesome.
or five sets of strings, and afterwards we'd roll them back up and put them away. So when we play live, we can have semi-fresh strings.
Yeah,
Without, we didn't just throw them
absolutely.
out.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, but again, I hope people listen and may take notes because that's also something I'm preaching all the time. But I know for a fact that a lot of people still don't believe that new strings make a difference.
Oh, especially the
And
bass. We noticed
oh
that
yeah,
a crazy amount. The bass, especially.
yeah, totally. Like you get that. I always call it like that piano tone that you get from fresh bass strings, where it's just
Mm,
clear with all the overtones, which sort of sounds like a low note on a piano, and I really love that. And you can
mm,
always make it duller if you want to, but
yeah.
you can't turn that dull string into that typical sound that you need for that sort of music, especially. Yeah, yeah, totally. Cool. Now, vocals. You said no cloud lifter, nothing. Did you notice? Because I can't remember I noticed anything like that, but I'm wondering because the one thing that happens if you don't use a cloud lifter, and for people who don't know what that is, it's like a little inline preamp. It's what it's called. You plug it between the microphone and the interface, and it's because a microphone like the SM7, a dynamic mic, doesn't put out a lot of level, a lot of volume, and you have to turn the mic pre on the interface up pretty loud to get a decent level. And what then happens is the cheap mic pre built-in mic pre's in cheap interfaces especially, they tend to get noisy if you turn them up to a certain degree. Like I think it depends on the interface, but most interfaces, if you turn them up more than half or maybe three quarters of the way, they tend to get really noisy. And with that preamp between the mic and the built-in preamp, you sort of increase the level of the mic while keeping the noise floor low, so you don't have to turn up the built-in preamp on the interface as much. Um, but I didn't notice any like noise problems with your recordings, so maybe that's just because what you said, you were pretty close to the mic and you sing pretty loud.
The gain was
So
turned almost all the way down for all the
Really?
leads, the main vocals, for me, because I was this far away from the microphone, and I had the gain turned pretty much all the way down just to stop it from clipping. For the like the low vocals and some of the harmonies, I
Really?
turned it up a bit. Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting because even
Mm,
even if you scream like with an SM7, I wouldn't expect that because it's just so quiet that even with
mm.
loud vocals, I usually have to turn the gain up a little bit. So you are really loud then.
Yeah, yeah. It's I've been told. Well, right now I have it turned literally the entire way up, just talking voice.
Yeah, of course.
Singing is a bit different though. It's I don't know if it's not always a good thing. The fact that I tend to sing that loud, it's a nightmare for the people that have to mix us live. Um,
Is it?
but sometimes it can be because especially if I'm going between like the softer stuff and then I go into that
Oh,
for
okay,
some
yeah.
parts. And even for me, like I have ini monitors and I can hear myself really well and I'm singing loud and then I go to like the bridge in I Swear I'm Over You and it's quieter and all of a sudden I can't hear myself at all.
Okay, yeah.
Um, and so that's a bit of a challenge. But yeah, we had the gain turned down almost all the way for most of the vocal takes.
Cool. Interesting. So that's why it worked. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, great, great. I mean, that's even better. The less you have in the chain, the better usually.
mm,
So cool.
that's the
Now, I
plan.
want to talk a little bit about the biggest challenge usually that people have with recording themselves, and that is you have to wear all these hats, like you are the producer and the artist and the engineer all at once. Like in case of the drums, you had help, but with like vocals and guitars, especially if the stuff that you did all by yourself. How did you deal with that? Did you think about that at all? Because I find it difficult sometimes, and I know for a fact that this is the biggest thing that people are struggling with. Um, it's hard to stay objective, and it's hard to, um, yeah, to just like do a great performance, but also keep the technical stuff in mind, and then also have the big picture, the artistic decisions in mind. It's like different from working in the studio where you have a producer who sort of challenges you and um, it makes you do stuff again if it's not there yet and sort of pushes you to get the best takes, and then you have like an engineer who like watches all the technical stuff so you don't have to worry about that and all you have to do is really perform, like, and everybody has their role, so to speak. So if you have to do all that yourself, has that ever been challenging? Have you ever thought about that, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, yeah. So we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that because we sort of had a blanket approach of make everything as keep everything as simple as possible, just to make it easier for you. So you could do pretty much everything for us, and you made us sound a lot better than I think we are, which turned out well. So thank you for that. But in we did in terms of thinking about the end result, a lot of the time we'd have a guitar part that we took a lot of guitar parts out that just simply didn't add to the song or like we thought was cool but it didn't it didn't make the song better, and it would have just been hard to mix in just extra auxiliary guitars. We took a lot of those out, purely for the reason that they didn't add anything to the song and we didn't want to have more than what was necessary because it just would have muddled everything. At least in our eyes, we just wanted to make everything as simple as possible and get the best sounds out of what we had.
Okay, cool. And about the like the I don't know, about the part like not having someone next to you who like challenges you and pushes you to do better or get the best takes out of you. Has that ever been a problem, or did you
Um,
feel like there were days where you were like, maybe I could have done better, but I was just done for the day, and
yeah,
I don't know. And if yeah, is that something you thought
yeah.
about?
Well, I think one of the good parts about Mark and I's relationship is that we're constantly pushing each other to get better and working together just to improve ourselves and improve the other person. Even if it's like I for a couple of times I did a guitar take and I was like, "That's pretty good," and he said, "Nah, do it again.
Okay,
That was
cool.
crap." Yeah, you hit a
So
bum
you
note there, and I
basically
didn't
oh,
even notice.
sorry. Yes, sorry. I thought you finished. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I'm done now.
Okay, okay. So that means you were basically two people in the room for the guitars most of the
Yep.
time. Ah, okay.
95% of the time, for the guitars, it and all the instruments, it was both of us. The vocals was different. It was mainly me, but just because I did a lot of a lot of takes, and then I did a lot of different harmonies, trying to figure out what was going to sound cool and um, what was what I needed to do to just make it sound bigger and not like take too much away from the lead and sort of thing. I did a lot of different trying different things out with the vocals, but for the guitars, it was the two of us were there the whole time pretty much.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that I mean that helps a lot because if you're on your own, it's very easy to just say, "Oh, that's good enough," and then
Yeah, for
move
sure.
on. Okay, yeah, cool. All right, then about the things you mentioned where you would you would probably do it different next time. What are some of those things?
Um, Vocally, I think I'd add. I only added a low vocal in the choruses, and I think in the verses for Blame, I don't remember why I only did it with Blame, but I would do it for every song, just to thicken it up. Even though you can't
Okay.
really hear it, just to thicken it up. Again, vocal harmonies, I probably would choose different ones. I'd spend a bit more time picking the exact right ones because I really only went for how am I going to make this sound bigger, not how am I going to like add dissonance in one part or try and create a run on one part just to further the song. I went specifically for just making the lead vocal sound as big as possible. The guitars, uh, we would probably try and do longer takes. A lot of the time we'd record the verse 4 times, then we'd record the pre-chorus 4 times, the chorus 4 times. I think we'd probably try and record as long a take as possible, just to save us the hassle of having to splice things in and zoom in really close to crossfade them and stuff. Because that we gave ourselves a fair bit of extra work doing that and trying to make that sound natural.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So, yeah, but it's interesting because all of the things you mentioned are about arrangement or workflow, but like nothing um like it seems like with the sounds you were getting, you were pretty happy. And it's interesting because that are the things that really matter. Like not the sound stuff, but like the arrangement and having a good workflow, having a good vibe, not spending too much time on stuff that doesn't really matter or just is just tedious. So I think you're focusing on the right things here, and I hoped that would be the answer, and I really hope people pay attention to that as well, because these things like which harmonies can I add, which additional layers can I add, what maybe can I, which parts can I maybe reduce, how can I create more dynamics, how can I make my workflow better, how can I make it more fun to record and less tedious. Like these are the things that really move the needle and that really make a difference in the end. And you could have said now as an answer to my question, you could also have said I think I'm going to buy a better interface or whatever, but that won't
How's it
get
works?
you exactly. It's like that will get you, I don't know, maybe a 0.5% I don't know, improvement, whatever, but that's not really worth it. It's much your time and energy and money and everything is much better spent on like improving your skills
Mm,
as an arranger, composer, musician, all that, because that is what actually matters. And you
mm.
already have tools that work that can capture well
Yeah,
what you do.
exactly.
And so cool. Really,
Yeah,
really cool.
like we thought about now that it's really the microphone was the only thing that we weren't happy with, and since I bought this one, is pretty much we now sort of have the tools, and buying slightly better guitars or a slightly better bass, slightly better interface, is really not gonna improve our songs as much as us just being like improving ourselves, improving our songwriting, improving our delivery, improving our playing. I think that'll get us much further rather than
Totally.
sort of blaming it on the tools. Like just with the tools we've got, how can we make the best sound possible? Really was our goal.
Totally. Did you ever think about programming the drums instead of recording acoustic drums? Because I think you did it very well, and I'm very happy you did it that way. But especially for younger bands and more modern sort of genres, it's become so common that people
Mm.
program drums that I'm just wondering if that was something you thought about as well.
Yeah, well, when we write drums, Mark just programs them all in just because it's quicker to write them
Yeah,
and get the demos down. Everything's just programmed with it's called MT Power Drum Kit. It's
yeah,
just a
it's free
basic.
too.
It's free,
Yeah,
yeah. That's you might notice that a trend of that is how can we do things for free?
yeah.
um, but yeah,
So you can invest in the right things. So yeah,
exactly. Spend more money on getting the mixing done perfectly, and so things sound better in the final result. Mark said he told me the other day part of the reason why, even though you can get a very good like programmed drum sounds, he wanted to say he played drums on the record was for one.
Yeah.
And number two, I've noticed in a lot of modern bands, the programmed drums, sorry, seem they just lack dynamic. I don't really know how to describe it. They like, especially with like kick drums, they're fake. Like it just seems to take away the character, and we really wanted the drums to sound like punchy and really make it seem like Mark was there hitting the drums really hard in front of you. Whereas with program drums, you didn't really get that. And although they're always going to be exactly on time, they I don't think they quite capture sort of the performance and the energy of the song as much as actually playing them does.
I agree. I agree. I mean, it gets better almost every year or every couple of months when because those every time a new library comes out, I'm even more impressed by how realistic and how good these things
Mm,
sound. And I've heard records and I've also done records where that have been completely programmed that actually sound pretty realistic.
mm,
But and so I think for some people it's a great substitute and the better way to do it depending on your situation, what you can do. But in your case, I think what you did, this sort of hybrid approach worked really, really well. And actually, it wasn't so much hybrid as I thought it would be because I ended up using pretty much of your natural drums actually. So there's really just samples that augment the sound, but I, yeah, I mean the original performance is completely in there, and it's actually most of what you hear on the record. So and I'm really glad that this is the case because there are some
yeah,
parts, also some really cool fills that Mark did that were I don't know that have there's something about his style of writing drum parts and playing them that I really liked, and there are some tom parts and some little details that I really like that I think you wouldn't you wouldn't have programmed them exactly that way. It wouldn't, or at least it wouldn't have sounded that way. There is this yeah this sort of raw energy, but it's tight at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but I really think he has sort of a unique playing style,
yeah.
and that really came through in the recording. So yeah,
Yeah, I
cool.
do. I do tell him all the time that he's my favorite drummer.
Yeah.
I do like the way. Well, a lot of the fills actually were programmed.
Okay.
But
Cool.
we'd sit together in a room and we'd come together. Like I came in with dissonant and losing sleep, and he came in with frustrated and half of blame, and I swear I'm over you, and we'd come in with basic demos and then we'd work on them together. A lot of the times the drums was, especially with my songs, as I don't really know enough about drums to program them well. Um, is he'd write the drums and I'd be in the room saying, "Oh, what if you do like a dooga 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 sort of thing?" Because I don't really know what I'm talking about with drums. And he'd sit there for hours, and he'd get a basic thing for the chorus and the verse done, and then we'd just say, "Do we need a fill in this part? Like, we need a fill for this part," and he'd sit around and move little MIDI items around a fair bit. And then he'd sit there. One of the things I like about what he does is he sits in the chair and he taps his feet and he slaps his legs as if he was playing the drums
Yeah.
to see if he can play it, sort of
Yeah.
thing. And he practices like that a lot too, which I don't know. I don't know how it works, but he plays everything perfectly live as well. So, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, a
Seem,
lot of it was programmed. Some of
mhm.
the stuff was he'd program it, he'd play the fill, and then he'd go, "Oh, I can make this slightly cooler by doing this one slight thing, or going halftime in this part, just to make it a bit more fun for him and a bit more sort of exciting for the listener as well." But most of it was programmed.
Cool. 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 I mean, it seems to work for him, and I think he's very modest, like humble, and like because he wrote me. I remember him writing a message after you got the mix back, or after you posted the first single, I think, and he was messaging me on Instagram, I think, and he was "Thank you for making me sound like I don't know what he said. Like I think thanks for making me sound like a better drummer or like better than I
Yeah,
actually am or whatever, something like that."
yeah,
And I was like, no, I actually didn't do that because like all I did was I made the drum kit and like the production sound better, but it's your performance. You played that, so I didn't change. I didn't make you a better drummer. I just enhanced it a little bit and made it bigger.
yeah,
But you can be really proud of what you did there and how you played that. So
yeah. No,
yeah.
he's modest enough. When it's just the two of us mucking around, we always like to make jokes about how we're the best band in the world and oh, we've never heard of Fallout Boy and we've never heard of Blink 182 and stuff, but we don't really mean any of that.
Of
We
course.
know our abilities and we know that we're not going to get anywhere by just saying, "Oh, we're great. We don't need to work on anything. We're going to continue to be better, and as long as there's people better than us in the world, we're going to keep practicing. We're never going to be as great a guitarist as the guys from Polyphia, and we're never going to be like as good as the drummers from bands like Slipknot or like the Rev from Avenged
Yeah.
Sevenfold or anything. But we're going to continue to progress and be as the best versions of ourselves as we can be.
Awesome. Yeah. So super cool to hear. Yeah. So I guess the most important question we haven't talked about, and that is, why did you decide to do it yourselves in the first place? And like, versus going to like, instead of going to a studio and do it all there. And do you think that the DIY route that you went with and this approach that you took, is that something you're going to continue doing? Do you feel like that really works for you? And yeah, both of those questions, like why did you do it, and do you think it's the right way for you?
Yeah, primarily it started out as just another way for us to save money, and we know that by doing DIs, we can do it to a pretty high level. Like, there's always going to be people that are going to do it way better than us, but we know with DIs we can do that fairly well ourselves. And just in terms of saving money as well.
Of course.
What was the second question? Sorry.
Yeah. First of all, why did you do it? And then the second one was, do you think it worked for you? So, and do you think that um, that's the right way for you to do it? And will
Oh yeah.
you continue to do that?
Yeah, we definitely will. I think that's for us. That's the best way to do it because we can sit there until 3 a.m. and do as many takes as possible. Because I work during the days and Mark works a lot of early mornings as well. And during the day, so it's really good for us to just come out and sit in my bedroom till 3 a.m., order pizza, and just do a heap of takes and change things. Whereas you don't have that luxury in a studio to do a million takes. You've sort of got to go in there, do the best you can, and then leave. Otherwise, it just gets too expensive. So I think we'll definitely continue to do that. We know a few ways of how we're going to do it better next time, but we'll definitely continue with that theme of recording everything ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So that's good to hear, because that's where what I was going at, because um, I think the money is probably, like, the money topic is probably the first thing that people think about, or what makes people first like try recording, experimenting with that, because obviously you can save money if you do it yourself, especially if you use your setup over and over again. Like, maybe if you only do one record, maybe not so much, because if you have to buy all the gear
Mm,
and like do it depending on your setup, on the setup that you need, it can cost just as much as like going to a studio. But if you use it over and over again, or if you just buy the minimum amount that you need and then rent out other things, that's like you did, then you definitely save some money. But the almost the most important part of that is, at least to me, the most important and the biggest advantage of doing it yourself is that you have complete freedom to do things the way you want them to do. Like, you're on your time, your schedule, as you said.
mm,
Um, you are the producer, so you have total creative freedom. There's pros and cons to that, but usually
yeah,
that's
for
all.
sure.
That's also, yeah, but usually that's also a pro if you know what you're doing, and if you're confident about your art and stuff. And then also, think about it. You can, if you do it yourself, you can do the demo, the writing, the demos, the pre-production, and the actual production, all sort of in the studio, like in your studio, and you can really do it the right way and go through the whole which is yeah, it's a luxury that you have, because if you figure out things during demos or during pre-production that just work, you can dial in those things and you can use that stuff later in the actual production process. And if you would do that in the studio, like if you would rent a studio to do writing, demos, and then the actual production and figuring out tones during production and all that, like the way that big bands make records in big studios sometimes, or back in the day more often than now, then that would cost so much money. and you have the luxury of doing everything in the studio sort of. And if you
Mm.
come across a cool thing during demos or doing during recording pre-pro, then you can just save that, make a note, and then come back to that during the actual
Mm.
recording, and it's just this fluent process in the same space, which is really really cool to me. And I think I think that's a big advantage versus the pressure you have when you are on, yeah, when you are on a budget in the studio and you only
Yeah.
have so many hours.
I think we played like we performed better, just not having the pressure of being in the studio as well.
Oh yeah, I absolutely believe that. Some people need that pressure, but for most people, I think as long as you can have two people in the room and push each other the way you described, I think that works really well. I mean, there are people who would probably be better off if they had someone like pushing them a little harder. But if you have two people that vibe like that and that, yeah, the way you described it, then that works really well. And you just feel comfortable. You don't have the pressure, but you can still, yeah, push yourself enough to do good work and get the best takes done. So, yeah, that's cool to hear. So, for future releases, you are going to probably do the same thing, just improve and
Yeah,
implement
we're
what you
gonna
learned.
keep the same uh, sort of vibe to it, but we're just gonna do it better. Basically, we've got a few ideas how we're gonna do it better. I'm sure we'll learn more and more every day. We watch a lot of YouTube videos on uh, like self-recording, and we watch your stuff. I know Dylan listens to your podcast a lot as well, and he just usually will relay that to us, and we're like, oh, it's a sick idea. Let's do it like that. So it's I think what you've got going, the self-recording band, is like a really good sort of resource for people like us, just to learn a bit more about how to make it better. Like,
Awesome, thank you. I'm glad that helps because that's the whole purpose of this. And yeah, the funny thing is, I what I do there is basically what I did with you on that record, like helping people, giving feedback on the demo thing and stuff. Um, that's what I've been doing for years, and I thought like I'm teaching the same stuff over and over again. I'm telling people
mm,
the same. I come across the same issues over and over again. And there are common themes, and like I just thought, why not give that to everybody or to all the people who find my stuff and listen to the podcast, compared to just telling it one person at a time. So I just did what I always did, but made it public, sort of, and it
yeah.
and it and it works, and it's glad because I can help so many more people now, and I'm glad it helped in your case. Um, Okay, cool. So before we wrap it up, tell us a little bit about the schedule ahead now. Like, what are you planning to do with Offset Vision? What releases can we look forward to? As of now, like it's September 1st now. They were tracking this episode. You have one single out, one video out. The second one will be out very soon. And what else is next?
Um, So we've got Blame, our second single, coming out in a couple of days. The video for that is almost. I'm not sure if it's going to be done for that release, but sometime very soon too. The EP, the full 5-song EP, is coming out October 1st. And we've got just local release shows due to because we're from the state of Tasmania in Australia here, the little island down below. We don't have any COVID here, luckily, so we're still able to play shows, which is
Cool.
good. A lot of them are only 80 or 100 caps, so that's a little bit hard, but it's still having 80 people at your show is awesome. So we can't go over to Melbourne where our bass player Callum lives at the moment. He's over there at uni doing art. He's stuck in lockdown, so he can't come down and play shows with us. But we're just playing local shows until the EP gets released, and then we're planning to sort of promote that with a few more shows around our state. Hopefully, lockdown ends and we can go up to Melbourne, or we know a band from a couple of bands from Adelaide that are really cool, and they came down and played with us, and we'd love to go up to Adelaide as well. Um, that's pretty much it in terms of shows. We don't have a lot lined up. We tend to just because we can't schedule things too far in advance. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but
No.
we know we're going to do one more music video, which will release a bit later in the year, just probably late November, early December, just sort of so we have something else to keep releasing. It's not just dump it and leave, sort of keep the hype up type of thing. And then Mark and I have a bunch of new demos that of half finished songs that we're going to keep working on. Um, and when they're done, we'll send you the demos and see what you think. And hopefully next year we can get you to mix a few more for us.
I'd be very happy to do that. So thank you. Awesome. Yeah. Maybe to tell people where they can find you. Like, what's the name of the EP? What's the names of the singles again? What's your website? Like, sort of everything people need to know if they want to check out the record, which you absolutely should if you're listening to this podcast, because I really, really, really like this EP, and I really think you should check it out if you're into punk rock, into pop punk, the sort of bands we mentioned. You got to check this out. So, where can they find you? What's the record called? Where can they find the videos and the single releases?
The record's called Glass Walls. The first two singles, I Swear I'm Over You and Blame, by the time this is edited and released, will be out on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all that sort of stuff. Um, these videos on YouTube. Our Facebook is facebook.com/OffsetVisionOz. That's like AUS, Australia. Uh, Instagram's the same, Offset Vision Oz. Twitter's the same.
Awesome.
Spotify, type in Offset Vision, we come up as long as you type in Offset Vision because there's a rapper called Offset or something. But yeah, it's pretty much. We have a link tree which is on our Instagram and stuff, and
Cool.
we've basically been trying to send people to that because that has Linktree's a great resource because we can list at the moment. We've got one to our music video, Spotify, our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that sort of stuff, and it's all in one convenient place. So that's really good. So that's what I've been
Awesome.
trying to send people towards, and they can choose whether they're. Some people use Apple Music, some people use Spotify. Click on
Of course.
respective link, and
Cool. Cool.
yeah,
Do you have a website, or is it just the link tree
just
on
the link tree.
Instagram for
We've
now?
been
Okay.
working on getting a website and some merch done. That's pretty much all Callum's domain. We rely on him a bit too much for that. He does a lot for us, and he's really good at what he does. So we appreciate him a lot. But he'll work on getting some merch done and getting a website up for us. Dylan will help him with that. He's good with that sort of thing as well. But for now, yeah, it is just the link tree. Because we've been super busy, obviously, with trying to line up shows and getting
Yeah.
everything organized.
Awesome. Cool. And then the final question: any physical releases planned for that EP or in the
No.
future? No.
Maybe in the future, maybe we'll think about doing something like a few CDs or like vinyl's really cool. I know vinyl's probably more popular than CD now anyway.
Yeah.
But we just don't think we'd sell enough at the moment to
Yeah.
justify it. It's expensive to print that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. And it
Um,
takes forever
and
right now. Yeah.
I don't use. I don't remember last time I used a CD. I have a vinyl player. I think I've used it once.
Yeah.
I collect a few vinyls just to have for decorations, really. But
Yeah.
personally, I don't use. I only use Spotify. Is my thing. Mark's the same. Only uses Spotify. Callum's the same. Dylan's the same. Most of our
Yeah.
friends are the same. They use Spotify, Apple Music. Yeah,
Totally.
it's a new world, and physical releases just aren't don't seem to be as important anymore. If enough people want them, yeah, we'll make them. But right now
Exactly.
it doesn't it's not really something that's on the cards.
Exactly. Yeah. I always tell bands that you should probably only do that if you have a good plan for it, and maybe work with a label who like sort of takes like with people who take care of that as well, because
Mm,
as you said, it's super expensive. You gotta have a plan to really like also sell them. Once you play more shows, I think relevant maybe, because you sell most records at shows typically. But
mm,
I personally wouldn't bother with it as well, like without a label. Especially, I would have a
mm,
label take care of that eventually, and then until then, I would just do it digitally. And also, I don't know about what it is in Australia, what it's like in Australia right now, but here, if you want to make vinyl records, the due to COVID and everything that has to do with it, it takes 6 to 8 months, sometimes even longer, to get a record manufactured. And you also have to order like huge quantities, and
Mm,
like it's really it's just a pain to do that right now. So I think you're better off not doing it.
mm. A lot of
So
bands
yeah,
here have talked about that, and a lot of people in our sort of scene or community, whatever you call it, have been talking about how
yeah,
bands have these vinyl releases, but they just have taken months to ship out just because mainly because of COVID and just manufacturing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes as well for this episode. So if you go to the selfrecordingband.com/podcast, you'll find all the episodes and this one as well. And if you click on it, you'll find the show notes to this episode. And there you find the link tree, the Spotify, Offset Vision, social media pages, and all of that. And again, check out these singles, the songs, the video. It's awesome. I really highly recommend it, and I really look forward to what you're doing in the future. I think you did an awesome job with this EP. I really appreciate you taking the time today because I think this was really helpful and also encouraging for people to hear because it just shows what is possible if you're just willing to improve, to constantly improve, to invest in yourself, to um, put in the work and the effort, and all you need is a pretty simple setup and just the drive and motivation to learn and do it. And I think it's really encouraging, and I hope people feel empowered now to do that themselves. So thank you for taking the time and explaining
Thanks for
that.
having me.
Yeah, and I wish you all the best and like all the success with that record and whatever you do in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, bye.
So yeah.
Awesome. So I stopped the